Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Imagine this. August 1949, deep in the Montana wilderness.
Okay.
An elite team of smoke jumpers, right?
Yeah.
Trained to battle wildfires. They find themselves completely trapped in this raging inferno.
Right. A terrifying situation.
And by, 5:45 p.m., escape is really their only option left.
Hmm.
But what happens next? Well, it defies all logic.
Oh, what did they do?
Well, their foreman, this guy, Wag Dodge, does something that just completely mystifies his crew.
Okay.
Instead of fleeing the massive blaze, he stops. Just stops. Pulls out a matchbook and starts lighting small fires in the dry grass around him.
He starts another fire.
Exactly. One survivor later said, "We thought he must have gone nuts. Why on earth would you start another fire when you're desperately trying to escape one?"
Wow. That's counterintuitive. But it's a chilling example, isn't it, of how quickly our deeply ingrained human instinct, honed for survival,
Yeah.
can become a profound liability when the environment shifts radically.
So running away from the fire, that's the instinct.
Absolutely. Under extreme stress, most people revert to automatic responses. Run away from fire, not towards it, not lighting more of it.
But Dodge didn't.
No.
Oh.
He survived Man Gulch because he swiftly overrode those powerful reactions. He literally created a safe zone for himself with that escape fire.
Escape fire.
Wow. But 12 others, they paid the ultimate price because they couldn't rethink their assumptions, their instincts in time.
That's incredibly powerful and tragic. And it brings us right to the core of today's deep dive, doesn't it?
It really does.
This extraordinary human capacity for rethinking. I mean, in a world that's constantly accelerating, constantly changing.
It feels faster than ever.
Right. The ability to just let go of old knowledge, old opinions that aren't serving you anymore, and to embrace flexibility over rigid consistency. It's not just useful, it feels absolutely vital now.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We're often really quick to update our possessions, our phones, clothes, kitchens.
Oh yeah, the latest gadget. Gotta have it.
But when it comes to our knowledge, our core beliefs, we tend to seize and freeze. That's the term.
Seize and freeze. Okay.
We favor that comforting certainty of conviction over the discomfort that comes with doubt. And here's the really tricky part. The more successful we've been with our old beliefs, the harder it is to let them go, even when they start actively holding us back. It's not just comfort. It's like this misplaced loyalty to past wins.
Ah, I see. Like, this worked before, so it must still be right.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what if we were quicker to make amendments to our own mental constitutions, as diligently as we update our tech?
That's a great question. So our mission today is to explore this fascinating world of rethinking. We're drawing insights from Adam Grant's book, Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know.
Great book.
Yeah. We'll look at why we often resist changing our minds, how you can cultivate a more flexible mindset,
Which is key.
and perhaps most importantly, how this skill can help you navigate challenges, personally, professionally, and maybe even help open the minds of people around you. We're going to try and equip you with some specific strategies, some examples, to help you become a more agile thinker in your own life. So why is it so tough to update our, internal operating systems? We'd laugh at someone using a flip phone from 1995.
Right. Or Windows 95, maybe.
Exactly. Yet we often cling to opinions we formed decades ago. What makes our minds so resistant to change?
Well, what's at play here is that seizing and freezing thing we just mentioned. Psychologists identify it as our natural human tendency to favor the comfort of conviction.
Comfort again.
Yeah, we let our beliefs get brittle long before our bones do. It just feels easier, doesn't it? To listen to views that make us feel good rather than engage with ideas that force us to, think hard.
That makes sense. And you've probably heard that old analogy, right? The boiled frog.
Oh yeah, classic. Drop a frog in boiling water, it jumps out, put it in lukewarm and heat it slowly.
It supposedly just sits there and dies because it doesn't notice the gradual change. Perfect metaphor for people who can't adapt, right?
It's a powerful metaphor, definitely, used all the time to illustrate complacency. But here's an interesting wrinkle. That story, it isn't actually true.
No?
Nope. Turns out, if you toss a frog in scalding water, it gets badly burned, might escape, might not. But in the slow boiling pot, the frog will leap out as soon as the water gets uncomfortably warm.
So the frog does adapt, or at least reacts.
It does.
Yeah.
So while the myth highlights a real human fear about, gradual negative change, the actual science challenges our assumptions about how awareness and adaptation really work.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Even our favorite analogies need rethinking sometimes. Okay, so if we're not quite the boiled frog, how do we typically engage when our beliefs are challenged?
Well, according to psychologist Phil Tetlock, we often slip into one of three distinct mindsets, modes almost.
Okay, what are they? First, there's the preacher. That's when our sacred beliefs feel threatened. And we basically deliver sermons to protect our ideals.
Mm-hmm. Defend the faith.
Then there's the prosecutor.
Yeah.
That's when we spot flaws in someone else's reasoning, and we marshal all our arguments to prove them wrong, win the case.
Right. Attack mode.
And finally, the politician. That's when we want to win over an audience, so we campaign and lobby for approval, trying to get people on our side.
Okay. Preacher, prosecutor, politician, I can see those. And the real risk with these modes, it's that we can become so wrapped up in being right, or at least appearing right,
Yeah.
that we don't even pause to rethink our own views. Think about Stephen Greenspan, an expert on gullibility.
Oh, I remember this story. It's a bit ironic.
Hugely. He lost nearly a third of his retirement savings in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. Why? Well, his sister acted like a preacher, praising the fund.
Okay.
He then turned prosecutor on a skeptical friend, just dismissing valid concerns. And then, to please a family friend who introduced him to Madoff, he slipped into politician mode, wanting approval. All three mindsets played a part in that disastrous decision.
Wow. That really illustrates the danger. Speaking of struggles to adapt, let's look at BlackBerry.
Ah, yes, the cautionary tale.
Remember them? 2009, they had nearly half the U.S. smartphone market. Huge.
Dominant. Unstoppable, it seemed.
By 2014, less than 1%. Mike Lazaridis, the co-founder, brilliant engineer, built the company.
Yeah.
What happened? Where did this innovation powerhouse go so wrong?
Well, the analysis suggests BlackBerry's downfall wasn't primarily a failure of the company or its technology, not at first anyway, but a profound failure of its people, especially leadership, to rethink.
So Lazaridis himself.
His personal struggles with rethinking, his attachment to the keyboard model, his dismissal of the iPhone threat, it ended up sucking the oxygen out of his own invention. In a world moving this fast, just having conviction isn't enough. You need to spend as much time actively rethinking, unlearning, as you do thinking and building in the first place. It's got to be an ongoing process.
An ongoing process. Okay. Now, we've all met those people, right? The ones who seem utterly blind to their own incompetence, yet they're brimming with confidence.
Ah, yes. The Dunning-Kruger effect.
That's the one. But what does it really tell us about, intelligence and belief?
This is where it gets really counterintuitive. Studies actually show that the smarter you are, the more you might struggle to update your views.
Wait, smarter people have more trouble rethinking.
On certain things, yes, especially on deeply held ideological issues like, say, gun laws. For instance, math whizzes. They're incredibly accurate at interpreting data that supports their existing beliefs. No surprise there.
Okay.
However, that very math prowess can become a liability if the data clashes with their ideology.
How so?
Their greater cognitive ability, paradoxically, allows them to more effectively rationalize away the contradictory evidence. They build these elaborate mental defenses for their existing beliefs instead of truly engaging with the data that challenges them.
So they use their smarts to avoid changing their minds.
Pretty much. They can fail spectacularly at analyzing patterns that contradict their views precisely because they're good at finding patterns that fit.
That is a real mind bender.
Uh-huh.
So what does this look like day to day? You might feel super confident, right? Answering questions like, why did English become the official language of the U.S.?
Seems like a simple fact.
Or, what job did Walt Disney have before Mickey Mouse? You feel that surge of confidence.
Huh?
Well, take a moment to rethink. America has no official language.
Oh.
And Disney didn't actually draw Mickey Mouse first. That credit goes to his collaborator, iWorks.
I actually didn't know that about iWorks, see?
It's remarkably easy to climb to what Adam Grant calls the summit of Mount Stupid, feeling you know it all without ever realizing how much you don't know.
Mount Stupid. I like that. A good place to climb down from.
Okay, so if overconfidence is a trap, maybe fueled by being smart even, what's the real antidote? It's not just low confidence, right?
No, definitely not. It's this concept called confident humility.
Confident humility. Tell me more.
It means being truly grounded. Recognizing that we are all flawed, we're all fallible.
Okay, the humility part.
Right. While still maintaining a strong belief in our ability to learn, to improve, to achieve our goals. That's the confidence part.
Ah, so it's a balance.
Exactly. It's knowing you need to recognize your limits to actually push beyond them. The most effective leaders, research shows, consistently score high in both confidence and humility.
That makes sense. And sometimes maybe what we see as a weakness can actually be a strength, like that feeling of imposter syndrome.
Oh, definitely. That nagging feeling where maybe your competence actually exceeds your confidence.
Yeah, feeling like a fraud even when you're not.
It isn't always a bad thing. Consider Hala Tomasdottir. She co-founded an investment firm in Iceland, navigated it through that massive financial meltdown.
Impressive.
Totally. Yet, when a petition started for her to run for president of Iceland, her very first thought was, who am I to be president? Classic imposter syndrome.
But she still ran, right?
She did. And while, look, a chronic, debilitating sense of unworthiness is definitely harmful,
Sure.
a less crippling sense of doubt can actually offer some real advantages. 3, Grant argues.
Okay, what are they?
First, it can genuinely motivate us to work harder. You feel you have to constantly earn your place.
Right, pushes you.
Second, it can make us much better learners. Hala herself said, imposter syndrome always keeps me on my toes and growing because I never think I know it all.
Ah, keeps you open.
Exactly. It encourages you to seek insights from others. Like, studies show charge nurses who felt some hesitation about their leadership role were often more effective because they actively sought second opinions and guidance. They didn't assume they knew everything.
Okay, harder work, better learning. What's the third?
The third benefit wasn't explicitly mentioned in the summary there, but it often relates to being more careful and less prone to overconfident mistakes. You double-check things.
Okay, that makes sense too. Now, I have to ask this. Would you volunteer for a study where your deepest beliefs are aggressively attacked?
Oh, wow. Probably not. Sounds unpleasant.
Right. But back in 1959, Harvard sophomores did just that. Psychologist Henry Murray ran it.
Okay.
Their personal philosophies were, and this is a quote, vehemently, sweepingly, and personally abusively assaulted by a law student hired for the task.
Ouch. That sounds brutal.
Totally. Many found it agonizing.
Yeah.
One participant, Ted Kaczynski, later became the Unabomber, and some speculate this experiment played a role.
Oh my God.
But here's the twist. Some students reacted with genuine enthusiasm. They kind of enjoyed it.
Enjoyed being attacked. How? Why? It's really counterintuitive, isn't it? How did they manage to enjoy having their core beliefs ripped apart? Well, Grant argues the point isn't to try to be wrong more often. It's about readily acknowledging that we are wrong more often than we probably like to admit.
Okay.
And when you learn to detach your opinions from your core identity, being wrong can actually transform. It stops being a threat to your ego and becomes, well, a source of joy almost, a moment of discovery.
What about discovery? Like, oh, I learned something new.
Precisely. The legendary investor, Ray Dalio, put it perfectly. If you don't look back at yourself and think, wow, how stupid I was a year ago, then you must not have learned much in the last year.
I like that. It reframes being stupid as learning.
Exactly. It's about growth.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And this brings us to some cool examples of this joy of being wrong in practice, like Jean-Pierre Bougam's.
Ah, the election forecaster.
Arguably the world's best.
Yeah,
Predicted Trump's nomination when pretty much everyone else scoffed.
right. How does he do it?
He thinks like a scientist. Passionately dispassionate is how Grant describes it. He treats his opinions as just hunches, hypotheses to be tested. He actively seeks out disconfirming evidence, stuff that proves him wrong.
So he's looking for reasons he might be wrong.
Exactly. And when he is wrong, he apparently laughs at himself and says something like, hey, I discovered something.
That's the mindset. That's confident humility in action.
Totally. And contrast that with Andrew Lyne, the physicist.
What did he do?
He published a major discovery, big deal in his field.
Yep.
Then he found an error in his own work.
Oh, awkward.
Hugely. But instead of hiding it, he stood up in front of hundreds of colleagues at a conference and admitted the mistake.
Wow, that takes guts.
Right. And what happened? He got a standing ovation for his intellectual honesty.
That's fantastic. It shows that admitting you're wrong isn't failure.
No, it's progress. It's integrity. It's about seeing being wrong not as a personal failing, but as a step towards finding the truth.
Okay, so rethinking ourselves is one thing. But what about changing other people's minds?
Yeah.
For years, I honestly thought the key to winning any debate was just, airtight logic, tons of data, the logic bully approach.
Yeah, apparently that's what one of my former students called me, a logic bully, because the harder I attacked with facts.
The harder they dug in their heels.
Exactly. I was so focused on convincing them, I just ended up alienating my audience completely.
That's such a common and frustrating trap. We think overwhelming force works, but it usually backfires.
So what does work?
Well, think about negotiation. Sometimes agreeing with part of someone else's argument, or at least acknowledging its validity.
Finding common ground.
Exactly. It can be incredibly disarming. Expert negotiators, research shows, spend over a third of their planning time just identifying potential common ground.
A third. That's a lot.
It is, and they present fewer but stronger reasons, not just throwing everything at the wall. They avoid what's called argument dilution.
Argument dilution.
Yeah, basically, a single weak argument can actually water down the impact of your stronger points. Less is sometimes more.
Okay, fewer, stronger points, find common ground. That
Yeah.
makes sense. So how do you actually, say, win a debate against someone who seems to have more data and the audience on their side?
Great question. Let's look at Harish Natarajan, world champion debater.
Yeah.
He faced off against an 8-year-old prodigy and an advanced AI, actually on the topic of preschool subsidies. The audience started out strongly for subsidies.
Tough opponent, tough crowd.
Right. But Harish managed to shift their opinion away from subsidies by the end.
How? What did he do differently?
What's really illuminating is his approach. First, he demonstrated genuine openness. He started by acknowledging where he actually agreed with his opponent.
Disarming, like you said.
Exactly. And he used what's called a steelman argument.
Steelman, not straw man.
Right, the opposite. Instead of attacking the weakest version of their argument, he addressed the strongest possible version of the other side's case. Shows respect, shows you've really listened.
Okay, acknowledges agreement, steelman's the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what else?
This is key. He asked questions. In his opening statement, he posed 6 questions directly to the audience.
6 questions.
The AI he debated against asked only 1. This highlights a crucial point. Asking questions is incredibly powerful.
Why? Because it gets them involved.
Partly, yes, but more deeply, it invites people to think for themselves. It gives them space.
Ah, so the real magic isn't in telling them they're wrong.
No, it's in guiding them. Psychologists have found this again and again. The person most likely to persuade you to change your mind is, well, you.
Yeah.
When you ask good questions, you give people the autonomy, the freedom to construct their own case for change, to discover their own reasons for shifting their perspective. You're not forcing it on them.
You're helping them find their own way there.
Okay.
But what about those situations where people seem completely resistant? Like dug in deep. Think about parents refusing to vaccinate their kids, even with overwhelming scientific evidence.
That's a really tough and important scenario. And it brings up a vital consideration. How can we encourage change without resorting to lecturing or coercion, which clearly doesn't work?
Yeah, just telling them they're wrong makes it worse.
Exactly. Bill Miller, a clinical psychologist, developed something called motivational interviewing.
Motivational interviewing.
Okay, it's built on a core premise. We can rarely motivate someone else to change directly. We're far more effective when we help them find their own internal motivation to change.
Helping them find their own motivation? How does that work in practice? Well, Grant tells the story of Arnaud, a neonatologist in France. He was dealing with a mother, Marie-Helene, who refused to vaccinate her young son, Toby.
Okay, a common challenge.
Instead of launching into a lecture about vaccine science, Arnaud did something different. He asked open-ended questions for over an hour.
An hour?
Yeah. Just listening carefully, validating her fears, acknowledging how confusing all the information out there could be.
So empathy first.
Totally. Then he asked permission to share his medical expertise. He didn't just assume she wanted to hear it.
Asking permission, that's interesting.
And he addressed her specific concerns, point by point. And crucially, he ended the conversation by affirming her freedom to choose. He respected her autonomy.
So no pressure at the end.
None. And the impact, it was profound. Later, a couple from Marie-Helene's village who had never vaccinated any of their children drove an hour and a half through a snowstorm just to talk to Arnaud.
Just based on her experience.
Apparently. And after just 45 minutes with him, using the same approach, they decided to vaccinate all 4 of their kids.
Wow. That's powerful. Listening and respecting autonomy unlocks something. It really does. And this technique, motivational interviewing, it extends far beyond the clinic. Think about Betty Bigambe, a Ugandan legislator. She famously used these principles to try and make peace with the brutal warlord Joseph Kony. She hiked miles through the jungle, not to preach but to listen to displaced people, to Kony's soldiers, even Kony himself eventually.
Listening to a warlord.
She empowered them to generate their own potential solutions. As she wisely put it, even the devil appreciates being listened to. It's about finding the human connection first.
Even the devil appreciates being listened to. That's quite a statement. Okay, switching gears slightly. We live in such a divisive time, right?
Feels like it more than ever.
Ideologies seem to be tearing us apart. The internet was supposed to expose us to different views.
Yeah, the promise of the global village.
But often, it just creates filter bubbles, echo chambers. We simplify everything complex into just two sides of a coin, black and white.
That's our innate human tendency for binary bias, as Grant calls it, simplifying complex issues into just two opposing categories. It makes things feel manageable, but it's often inaccurate.
So how do we fight that binary bias?
Well, Peter Coleman's research challenges the common assumption that simply showing people both sides is enough. That can actually reinforce the divide sometimes.
Right, just makes people defend their side harder.
Exactly. Instead, Coleman suggests we need to complexify the issue.
Complexify, make it more complicated.
Kind of. It means presenting the issue not as a simple dichotomy, but through the many lenses of a prism, showing the nuances, the gray areas, the multiple facets.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure.
In one study, an article on gun control was reframed. Instead of just pro-gun versus anti-gun extremes.
The usual shouting match.
Right. It was presented as many interrelated dilemmas, focusing on things like mental health, community safety, individual rights, different types of regulations, all the messy parts.
Okay, showing the complexity.
And something remarkable happened. When pro-life and pro-choice advocates were brought together and discussed abortion using a similarly complexified framing, they were able to find common ground in just 20 minutes.
20 minutes on abortion, that's incredible.
Isn't it? What this shows us is that when experts or articles, or even just us in conversation, admit uncertainty, present caveats, show the gray areas, we actually become more persuasive, not less.
So admitting you don't have all the answers makes people trust you more.
It signals intellectual integrity. It makes people lean in, pay more attention, and open their own minds, because you're not presenting a simplistic, dogmatic view.
Fascinating. Okay, what about really deep-seated stuff, like stereotypes, prejudice?
Yeah, that's the really hard stuff, isn't it? Think about it. If you're a diehard Red Sox fan, how much would it take to get you to root for the Yankees?
Probably an apocalypse. Or maybe not even then.
Right. Fans of rival sports teams can develop this truly intense animosity. But that same dynamic, that us versus them, it exists everywhere. Politics, nationality, any group where we feel our identity is tied up or threatened.
Psychologists confirm that. We're fundamentally motivated by belonging and status, right? Identifying strongly with a group checks both boxes, makes us feel safe and important.
So how on earth do you get people to rethink prejudices that feel that fundamental?
Well, the story of Daryl Davis is pretty remarkable here.
The musician.
Yeah, a black musician who has made it his mission for decades to confront white supremacists, Klansmen, neo-Nazis.
Confront them, how? Debating them.
Not really debating, more like befriending them. He sits down, listens to them, finds common ground on music or family, and over time he's actually gotten dozens of KKK members to abandon the Klan, to give up their robes, because he helps them see the arbitrary roots of their hatred.
Arbitrary roots.
Yeah, often it's tied more to family tradition or needing a group to belong to rather than any deep personal conviction or experience. He helps them question why they believe what they believe.
By listening and finding common humanity. That's extraordinary.
It really is. And what does this tell us about tackling prejudice more broadly?
Well, Grant did some research on those Yankees and Red Sox fans.
Okay, what did they find?
They found that simply having fans reflect on the arbitrariness of their own allegiance.
Arbitrariness,
Like asking them to consider, if you were born into a family of fans of the rival team, you would likely be a fan of them today, wouldn't you? Just planting that seed of contingency.
Making them realize it wasn't necessarily a logical choice, but kind of an accident of birth.
Exactly. And after just that simple reflection, those fans selected less fiery hot sauce to give to rival fans in a taste test.
Less punishment.
And they picked easier math problems for rival fans to solve. Just that little nudge towards recognizing the arbitrary nature of the divide reduced their animosity.
That's amazing. It strongly suggests that if we can gently help people question the origins of their own beliefs, their own group loyalties, It really can open the door to rethinking prejudice.
Yeah, it's not about attacking them, but inviting curiosity about their own minds.
Okay.
Okay, so we've looked at rethinking for ourselves, rethinking in our interactions. What about in big organizations, especially places where mistakes can have huge consequences, like NASA?
Right. High stakes. In 2013, remember, astronaut Luca Parmitano almost drowned during a spacewalk.
Oh, I do remember that. Terrifying. Water leaking into his helmet. How did that happen? Why wasn't it caught?
Well, the investigation found that essentially minor amounts of water in the helmet had become normalized.
Normalized. A little water in your helmet in space seems not normal.
You'd think. But how could they overlook something so critical? It goes back, Grant argues, to NASA's deeply ingrained performance culture. Excellence was paramount. Failure wasn't really an option.
Okay, striving for excellence sounds good, though.
It is, but it can have a dark side. It inadvertently led to these overconfidence cycles. People became hesitant to speak up about small anomalies or doubts because the pressure was always on a flawless performance.
Ah, so minor issues got swept under the rug.
Or explained away. They missed opportunities for crucial rethinking, just like tragically happened before the Challenger and Columbia disasters, where engineers' concerns were silenced or ignored.
Because the performance culture prioritized sticking to the plan over questioning it.
Exactly. It shows how too much emphasis on just performance can actually stifle the critical thinking and open communication needed to prevent disaster.
So if that kind of high-pressure performance culture is the enemy of rethinking, what's the antidote for an organization?
To build a truly effective learning culture alongside the performance one, you absolutely need psychological safety.
Psychological safety, meaning...
It's creating a climate of respect, trust, and openness where people feel genuinely empowered to raise concerns, admit mistakes, ask questions, challenge the status quo, all without fear of reprisal or humiliation.
Feeling safe to speak up, basically.
Yes. Melinda Gates modeled this powerfully at the Gates Foundation. She participated in a mean reviews video, like the Jimmy Kimmel segment.
Reading nasty tweets.
Yeah, but these were harsh comments from her own staff about the foundation's work. She read them, responded thoughtfully, showed vulnerability.
Wow, that takes courage from a leader.
Absolutely, and it inspired employees to recognize their own shortcomings, demonstrating that it takes, as Grant puts it, confident humility to admit that we're a work in progress, even at the highest levels.
It sets the tone from the top.
Crucially. And in these performance-driven cultures, organizations also often get rigidly attached to best practices.
Oh yeah, every company wants best practices.
But there's an inherent risk. Once a routine is declared best, it tends to freeze in time. People stop questioning it, stop looking for its flaws or ways to improve it.
So best becomes the enemy of better.
Exactly. We should instead be constantly seeking better practices, always iterating, always questioning.
Okay, so how do you encourage that? If focusing only on outcomes, success or failure can breed overconfidence.
Right. You can succeed despite a bad process sometimes, which reinforces the bad process.
So instead, organizations need what Grant calls process accountability.
Process accountability. What's that? It means tracking and evaluating how thoroughly different options were considered, how rigorously assumptions were tested, how well dissenting views were heard, regardless of the final outcome. You reward good thinking, not just good luck.
Okay, evaluating the decision-making process itself.
Yes, and when you combine that process accountability with psychological safety, that creates a true learning zone where people feel genuinely free to experiment, challenge each other's ideas respectfully, and innovate without fear.
Learning zone. I like that.
There's a great example of this. Ellen Ochoa, first Latina in space, later became director of the Johnson Space Center at NASA.
Okay.
In 2006, during a shuttle launch countdown, she made the tough call to vote against the launch due to concerns about some sensors, even though she was in the minority.
Going against the grain, especially at NASA Launch Control, must be hard.
Immensely hard. But crucially, no one berated her for it. The culture allowed for that dissent, that caution.
And what happened?
The next day, the sensors worked fine, the launch went ahead. But later, NASA did identify the root cause of those intermittent issues she'd flagged. Her decision, and the culture that allowed it, helped NASA execute 19 consecutive successful missions afterwards. It made others rethink their own approach to launch day decisions.
Because she felt safe enough to raise a concern, and the process valued her input.
Exactly. Process accountability plus psychological safety.
This whole principle of rethinking, it feels like it extends really profoundly to our personal lives too, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So many of us, maybe from childhood, feel this pressure to have a clear 10-year plan for our lives, know exactly where we're going.
Yeah. what you want to be when you grow up, turns into where you see yourself in 10 years.
Right. Grant mentions his cousin Ryan. Followed the family dream, became a neurosurgeon, grueling hours, deep debt.
The whole 9 yards.
Only to admit, years later, if he could do it again, he'd probably choose a different path. That's what Grant calls identity foreclosure, or tunnel vision.
Yeah, getting locked in too early. And those detailed life plans, while they feel secure, can actually blind us to other possibilities that might make us happier or be a better fit as we change.
And they lead to that escalation of commitment. Right?
Exactly. Pushing forward on an unfulfilling path just because you've already invested so much time or money or effort. Sunk cost fallacy, basically.
So while grit is valuable,
Hugely valuable.
there's a fine line between heroic persistence and just, well, foolish stubbornness.
Absolutely. Sometimes the bravest, grittiest thing you can do is grit your teeth, admit you're on the wrong path, and have the courage to turn around or pivot.
Okay, so what does this actually mean for you, the listener, navigating your life and career, instead of a rigid 10-year plan?
Which is probably unrealistic anyway.
Right. Consider Herminia Ibarra's framework, which Grant highlights. Think like a scientist about your career.
A career scientist. Okay.
Step 1. Entertain possible selves. Brainstorm diverse interests, skills, values you might want to explore. Don't limit yourself early.
Open up the possibilities.
Step 2. Develop hypotheses. Okay, if I'm interested in X, what kind of work or project might align with that? Formulate some educated guesses.
Like mini experiments.
Exactly. And step 3. Test out identities. Actually try things. Through informational interviews, small side projects, volunteer work, workshops. Get real data on whether these possible selves actually fit.
Learn by doing, basically.
Yes. The goal isn't to find the one perfect path immediately, but to expand your repertoire of possible selves, keeping you agile and open to rethinking your direction as you learn and grow.
That feels much more adaptable and less pressure-filled. And this scientific approach, it applies beautifully to relationships too, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, Grant mentions a former student who was seriously questioning his year-long relationship. Why? Because his girlfriend didn't fit the image he'd formed as a teenager of an ambitious partner.
Holding on to an old definition.
Right. But after doing a sort of life checkup, an intentional moment of rethinking his own values, he realized what he valued had changed. Ambition looked different to him now.
So he rethought his criteria.
Exactly. He decided to let go of that outdated, preconceived image. And interestingly, his fiancée later changed jobs and became incredibly passionate about educational equity, finding her own form of ambition. Rethinking allowed them both to evolve, and the relationship grew stronger.
Because he didn't foreclose on her potential based on his old ideas.
Precisely. And ultimately, maybe the goal isn't just chasing this fleeting idea of happiness. Maybe it's more about pursuing meaning.
Meaning over happiness.
Well, often they overlap, but meaning can be more durable. And passions, Grant argues, are often developed through effort and engagement, not just magically discovered, fully formed.
So you build passion by doing things.
Yes. By investing in learning, by tackling challenging problems, by getting good at something. You build the skills and the passion for a truly worthwhile life. Think of Candace Walker, the cancer center nurse.
Okay.
She found deep meaning in her demanding role, not just by doing the tasks, but by actively job crafting. She transformed her chemotherapy center into what she called a house of hope, focusing intensely on patients' emotional well-being alongside their treatment.
She redefined her role to maximize meaning.
Exactly. It's a powerful example of rethinking not just a job description, but its profound purpose and impact.
Wow. Okay, so today we've taken quite the deep dive into this transformative power of rethinking.
We really covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, from that split-second life-saving decision of smoke jumper wag dodge
Incredible.
to the strategic pivots of world champion debaters, the failures of giants like BlackBerry, and the quiet courage of everyday individuals changing their minds and lives.
And organizations like NASA learning hard lessons.
Right. We've seen why our default settings, those preacher, prosecutor, politician modes, the seizing and freezing, often hinder us.
And how embracing more of a scientist mindset in our own lives, that curiosity, that humility, can lead to profound and continuous growth. And goodness knows the world is full of evolving threats and complex challenges right now. Pandemics, polarization, climate change.
Yeah, it feels overwhelming sometimes.
In the face of all these complexities, humility, doubt, and genuine curiosity, they aren't weaknesses. They are absolutely vital tools for discovery, for adaptation, for finding better solutions.
So being willing to be wrong is actually essential.
It really is. There's that old quote, maybe a bit cynical, that a new scientific truth triumphs not because opponents are convinced, but because its opponents eventually die.
Huh. Grim, but maybe true historically.
But we don't believe that has to be the case for each of us individually. We all have this incredible capacity to think again. And maybe bold, persistent experimentation with our own minds, our own beliefs, maybe that's our best tool for navigating whatever comes next.
Thinking like a scientist about our own lives. Okay, so to wrap up, here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to mull over.
Okay.
The author of the book we've been discussing, Adam Grant, he shares a little story at the end. He learned that scientists had revised their thinking about dinosaur feathers, specifically the T-Rex.
Oh, feathers or no feathers, always a debate.
He originally believed, based on earlier science, that T-Rexes were covered in vibrant feathers.
Cool image.
Yeah. But the current consensus, mostly scales. Though another related tyrannosaur, the Utyrannus, did have feathers. Science marches on, rethinking happens.
Even about T-Rex fashion.
Exactly. And Grant then reflected on this ongoing process of rethinking, even in his own work, his own assumptions. He even realized, humorously, he needed to rethink his pronunciation of mayonnaise.
Huh. Important stuff.
So the question for you is, what ideas or opinions do you need to rethink right now?
Good question.
What knowledge or belief, if you were to look back a year from now, would you want to look at and say, wow, how stupid I was then? What discovery would that represent?
And maybe crucially, what evidence, if you encountered it, would actually change your mind about something important? Are you open to seeing it?
We encourage you maybe to schedule your own life checkup once or twice a year, just like you schedule health checkups, a time to intentionally pause and rethink.
And perhaps even more regularly, just make a little time to simply think again.
We really hope this deep dive encourages you to put on your own scientist goggles a little more often and embrace the power of knowing what you don't know.